Hi, I'm Nate Dogg. Warren G. Totally joking. But you got to love a little bit of Regulators in church, right? You know, I mean, it's kind of cool. Well, hey, it's week 2 of this series called "How You Doing," right? And really, we're asking the question is how are you doing? Really, it's getting real about what's really going on. That we said that over the next few weeks, we felt it important for us as a church to not just simply go surface level on surface level ideas and kind of pretend that everything's okay, but that we would go and dig down beneath, that we would get below the surface, that we would realize that there's some things that lie down below that could be absolutely affecting us ultimately in every area of our life, and those should be talked about. In fact, we believe that the church should actually take a front and center, kind of front row seat, kind of leading the charge in having those conversations. And so we're glad that you're choosing to lean in and be a part of that. I also have the awesome opportunity as we join in on week 2 to introduce you to my friend. She's also probably many of your friends. She calls Cityline home, but this is Susette Magaña. And would you give her a hand? Susette, she serves in lots of different areas here at the church, but on her real job, her day job, right, throughout the week, she is a licensed marriage and family therapist. And so I've asked her to come and to share and to teach today as we talk about the importance of emotional health. And so this is her first time teaching a message here at Cityline. She's been doing an incredible job today. I'm just going to warn you in advance, right? But can you just help me out and just give her a really nice, warm Cityline welcome as she prepares to teach today?
Thank you, everybody. Okay, my big hair is definitely going to interfere with the microphone, so let's see how we do today. Can I hear everybody do a good Joey, how you doing? Say, how you doing? How you doing? Is anyone good at the Wendy Williams, how you doing? Raise your hand if you're good at the William. I'm not, so I've been practicing all week. It's not working out, but let's try it. How you doing? This, you did the hands, exactly. Okay, so Wendy Williams was up on that video a lot. I don't know if you guys know. So today we are going to talk about emotional health, which is kind of my favorite topic on the planet, especially as we integrate it in with how God wants us to be emotionally healthy. And I'm so excited to be a part of a church that cares about your emotional health, and they really do. The first time I met Pastor Jack before I came to Cityline, we spent 2 hours talking about things of the mind and the heart and emotions and psychology nerdy things. And that's how I knew it was a place for us, you know? So I'm excited to be up here and talking about it today. In last week, Pastor Jack started this series talking about the soul and how the soul is a combination of a bunch of different parts of us. It's a very kind of holistic idea of who we are. So the soul is comprised of the body. Everyone say body. The mind and the will. Now, this is a theory from Dallas Willard, okay, in case you want to look it up. And Dallas Willard says that the soul is actually the integration, not just of these parts, but how these parts work together. So the will is the part of us that makes decisions and choices. The mind is really a combination of thoughts and emotions. It's our consciousness. It's how we are aware of things. It's one of those big parts that makes us human. And in the ancient world, the mind was thought of as like the heart. In the Bible, it talks a lot about the heart, the center of our being, those thoughts, those feelings, and our consciousness. And then the body is part of the soul too, and that's the physical part of us, right? And our bodies are amazing, but they're not our whole story. They're not all that we are. But these parts work together in ways that is kind of hard to describe, but we'll talk about how they tie in today. So Dallas Willard says that the soul seeks harmony, connection, and integration. Everyone say harmony, connection, and integration. And so think of the word integrity. That's a deep word. If you have integrity, that's something that brings up a lot of emotion. When I think of someone that I know that has integrity, I feel so proud to know them and I want to be near them. And integrity is really that we're acting, our inside is matching our outside, right? Who we are inside matches our behavior. Those parts work together. And it's the same for the body, the mind, and the will. So we integrate with integrity, we integrate the inside parts of us, our will, our mind, and our body, and then we are a complete person. But integration in this way in our souls is also about integrating us in our relationship with God, our relationship with others, and with his creation. And then beyond that, the soul seeks to connect us with other people, creation, and God himself. And God roots us in him when we're integrated. And he gives us life through that rooting, like a tree, like a tree roots deep in the ground, collects all the good nutrients. I'm not a gardener, I don't know. But like it collects all the nutrients, right? And then the tree lives. It's from the roots. So today we're going to focus on the mind part of the soul. So here's the problem. Disintegration. Everyone say disintegration. And that's when these parts, the mind, the will, the body, feel disconnected from themselves, or when we feel disconnected from our relationships, including our relationship with God. So here's some ways that we feel disintegrated. Rumination. We get caught up in spinning feelings and thoughts, and that leaves us feeling hopeless and out of control. So you know that thought when someone says something to you that's not nice, that you hear about, and you let it spin in your mind over and over, and you wonder, is this who I am, what they said about me? Or is this something that I should worry about? Or you spin like, how dare they say that kind of thing about me? I have to go talk to them, but then you never do, and it spins and it spins. Emotions, too, can do the same thing. They kind of roll within us with no help, with no relief. And that's something that can create a feeling of hopelessness, or feelings of rage, or feelings of anxiousness, anxiety. So anxiety, also trauma memories are things that ruminate and pop up with us. Did you know that memories and trauma memories are really two different kinds of memories? When you have a trauma memory, when something bad happened to you when you were young or last week or whatever, it will actually freeze in your mind, and then it pops back up in a way that it feels like you're reliving in the memory. Does that happen to anybody in this room? So it's not just a memory. It's not like, when I was in high school, like I got into a fight with my friend. It's like when this happened to me, and when I remember it, I actually relive it, and my body starts to feel the way it felt back then. So you'll actually feel like flushed or overwhelmed. You're pumping with adrenaline, and that's like a trauma memory. We can live and kind of ruminate in that. Also, resentment is a form of anger that we ruminate on. When I've been mad at somebody for a long time, that grows into resentment at some point, and then I really disconnect from them. So for those of us who've experienced trauma, we feel an overdrive feeling a lot of the time where we're kind of running too quick, or we can actually shut down. So some people that have a lot of trauma have shut down their emotions. And I think sometimes I feel like when I get up on stage, I feel like there's going to be people that go, emotions, a therapist, I don't have to worry about my emotions. I'm not an emotional person. But everyone here is an emotional person. Even if you feel more of the shut down kind because you had to shut it down because you were trained to do that or because of trauma, you're an emotional person. Some of us feel emotions outwardly, some of us feel them inwardly. But both ways, you're an emotional person, okay? We can talk more about it afterwards if you need to. I'll convince you. I'll try hard. I can over you. Okay, so after we feel that overwhelming feeling, we tend to react because we try to really kind of calm down, but we calm down in ways that aren't good for us. So have you ever been in a situation where someone yells and then someone else yells louder to shut up the person that yelled in the first place? Does that just happen in my family? Just checking. That's a reaction, right? Someone yells, the person that hears it feels overwhelmed, and then they react to try to shut down what therapists would call the stimulus. Try to shut it down, right? Try to make it quiet. But you're actually adding to the loud. You're adding to the anger. When we begin to heal, we learn to respond instead of react. So instead of reacting, we learn to think, make a decision, and then confront what needs to be confronted. And we don't all just overreact by yelling. Some of us react by shutting down. And that's a reaction too. So instead of that, we would actually stop. We would try to calm down inside. And then we would try to confront in a compassionate way the person that's offending us. Nobody's good at this, okay? Everyone's got this stuff. So I try my best when I speak to be honest about the struggles that I have in this way, because I feel like a lot of times there's an expectation that I'm going to have it all together. And that is far from the truth. And I'll tell you some stories about that. But we're all on this road. And we do have hope, and God is good. And he created us to learn how to do these things together and on our own in relationships. And on our own, he created us to give us the peace that we can live out in a way where we do present as present and calm at the same time. So this shift, it changes our relationships and our reputations, because then we're acting with wisdom. We're making wise decisions instead of overreacting. And this, in our relationships, makes us more trustworthy and more respected. You know that person? I have a couple people in my life that are so wise. And they are trustworthy because I know that they're not going to overreact or shut down. You know, I want to be that person. I am in session. Outside it's different, but that's okay. All right. So here's another problem. If we don't deal with our painful emotions, like anger, fear, sadness, they can become ways of life or parts of our identity. And those identity words with emotions is like resentful. She's a resentful person. Or he's just an anxious person. Or like she's just kind of hopeless. She never can see the bright side of things. There's no hope there. So we really, like, when the emotions ruminate in us for a long time, they become a way of life. And these are postures more that the soul takes than they are just like, I feel an emotion and I respond, you know? So the emotions become an identity. They become part of who we are, and that makes our soul sick. And if we go back to the soul model that we were talking about last week and this week, the soul is the body, the mind, and the will, and all three of those things can become sick when emotions become identity like that. They seep into the fabric of our soul. They change our thinking in ways that's unhealthy. We begin to have really like distorted thinking about what's happening around us and what people are doing to us or how they feel about us or how we feel about them. So in order to not fall into these ways of living, we need to acknowledge the emotion and confess it before God and trusted people that have your back, okay? And then we work to keep our hearts and minds tender and responsive towards others. So let's pop up the Bible verse. This is my prayer very regularly. I pray, well, read it with me. Ezekiel 36:26. Read it with me. You ready? I will take your stony, stubborn heart, and I will give you a tender, responsive heart. Say it again. I will take out your stony, stubborn heart, and I will give you a tender, responsive heart. This is a passage that I've had kind of like up on my wall in my office, in front of my face, whenever I can get it. And my prayer is, God, please take out my stony, stubborn heart and give me a tender, responsive heart. Take it out, tenderize it. Get out a meat tenderizer. My dad was a butcher growing up, so get out a meat tenderizer and just smack it. Make it tender. Do you guys know about meat tenderizing? Okay. Sorry, Pastor. Okay, so here's the truth about emotion. Emotions, all of them, are normal. Everything you feel, everything that comes up inside of you, normal. Use the word normal. Say normal. No emotion is good or bad, meaning you're not doing anything wrong by feeling feelings, even strong feelings. That kind of makes my Christian little girl inside of me feel weird, but we're going to roll with it, okay? So we often get stuck in two extremes. We either try to avoid what we feel, or we allow our emotions to run our behaviors. And if you're the person that avoids what you feel, you're kind of weirded out by the people that allow emotions to run your behavior. And if you're the emotion run your behavior person, then you kind of go, they're so shut down. But no need to judge, because we're all kind of in the same boat, okay? We either do one or the other. And we're trained as kids to not feel one or two emotions. Almost every person I know has a family background where they were not taught to feel one thing or two things, and that was not okay. It was weak or it was out of control. Sometimes it's based on cultural expectations. There are a whole kind of culture of people that teach you not to feel a feeling. Sometimes it's gender expectations. Sometimes men aren't allowed to feel sadness. Is that the one? Women aren't allowed to feel anger. I feel like in my office, and everyone that feels angry, especially because I work with a lot of Christians, feels guilt about it. And so a lot of our work is figuring out how to feel angry in a way that's healthy, but not to shut down the angry feeling. So can you think of what emotion you were raised with that you weren't allowed? Can you think of an emotion that you weren't allowed to feel? Can you think of one or two or 5 or 25? For me, it was anger. Not on purpose. My parents are awesome. They did not know how to feel anger, and so they couldn't teach me how to feel it. And so my anger journey is something that I've been on since I was very young, trying to figure out what I feel and figure out if it's okay. And it's something that I struggle with shame with a lot, and I think that's pretty normal. I know it's normal for Christian females because of all the ones that end up in my office that I teach how to feel appropriate anger, even as I'm learning myself. So like when we're not taught an emotion, so we only know our emotions from our parents if our parents explain that to me. So like ideally, no parents are perfect, okay? So no parent guilt as we talk about this. Everyone's just trying to do better. But ideally, as your kid is feeling angry, and let's say they like break a toy or hit you in the face or something. Okay, so let's say that they're angry. The appropriate response is, I see that you're angry, and that's okay. But you can't break that toy, and you can't hit me in the face. I don't know. We'll find a better example. But does that make sense? Like you say, I see that you're angry. I know you're angry. Okay, you're angry. Cool. Don't do that. Don't do that behavior when you're feeling this normal emotion. If only we had someone saying that to us our whole life, you know? So when we're not taught that, when we're not taught, hey, I see that you're angry, that emotion feels confused. And the normal feeling that we're feeling in our body and our mind and our heart, it kind of gets shut down in a way where we feel confused by it. And then we either react by overdriving it or shutting it down. Another thing that's very true about emotions is they are layered. So it's really common to feel a few feelings at once, 25, 30 emotions at once, I don't know. And a thing that I've noticed, all therapists say this, like anger is a secondary emotion. Have you ever heard that? Anyone watch Star Trek? The Next Generation? Okay, thank you. Nerd in the back, I'm with you, brother. So I grew up with my daddy watching Star Trek The Next Generation, and we used to love the part where like they turn on whatever in the main deck. It's been a while, so I can't remember the terminology, but and then they would turn on the force fields, right? And so there's like this force field, and you don't see it until the Klingons shoot something at the ship, and then you see like the ripple of the force field. You guys with me? Okay. So anger is like a force field. We'll be feeling very vulnerable emotions inside. We'll be feeling sad or anxious or threatened in some way, overwhelmed, and instead anger becomes something that wraps around us, and it defends us against the thing or the person or the threat that's coming at us. Okay, good. So anger is functional, but it depends on what we do with it, right? But there's all these layers of emotion that's underneath the anger, and I can almost always find like 4 or 5 emotions that I'm feeling at once. It's super chaotic inside this mind. No, just kidding. No, but like it can be overwhelming unless I can just identify it and call it what it is, and then it's okay. Grief is something that overwhelms us with anger and sadness, kind of in a back and forth way, where we find ourselves angry first, and then we find ourselves feeling sad. And if we just allow it to flow, then we grieve well. But if we think, well, I shouldn't be feeling angry because of this, this, and this, even though I am grieving, then we shut it down, and then it builds inside of us. Does that make sense? Okay, so one last thing. Angers and behaviors are 2 different things. Sorry, emotions. Talking a lot about anger. Emotions and behaviors are 2 different things. So when we feel something, we then make a decision to act. It may not feel like you're making a decision, but you do. I used to work with kids like in a school environment, and one of my first therapy jobs, and I had a client who I was always trying to convince. She's like 13. She's very cute. And I was always trying to convince her that there was a difference between feeling angry and punching that girl in the face when you went into the classroom. I could not convince her. Like, to that client, anger was punching somebody in the face. They couldn't disconnect the emotion and the action. There's a big difference between feeling angry and punching somebody in the face. Just in case you don't get anything else out of this message, that's something to know. Dan Allender is a psychologist and a theologian, and he runs an organization up in Washington. He's got a really cool haircut. You guys should Google him. And he says, ignoring our emotions is turning our back on reality. Listening to our emotions ushers us into reality, and reality is where we meet God. Okay, so God created us to experience a full range of emotion, but not to be subject to our emotions, not to let them run our lives. And I use like this idea of like emotions. If we're in the car, we are driving the car. The emotion is in the back seat. Emotions are not driving our car for us, making our decisions for us, but they're not in the trunk where we're shutting them down and ignoring them. They're signals, they're information, they're helpful. And the goal of emotional health is that we're able to feel that full range of emotion without self-judgment, without shame, but that we have enough wisdom to not react with our body, right? Back to the soul model, to them, but that we make decisions and respond with our will when we feel them. So see that integration. Our mind meets the body, meets the will, the soul. Got it? Let's talk about emotions in the Bible. Cognitive behavioral theory is a theory in psychology, and it teaches us that thoughts are different than emotions. And when we allow them to interact, it helps us to make good decisions, that will, part of the soul, by acting with wisdom. That brain, that thought, that emotion, that combination helps us to act with wisdom. And wisdom is all over the Psalms, right? The Psalms, the Proverbs, all over the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament. Wisdom is a big part of the New Testament too. Acting with wisdom is an important part of our faith. Yahweh in the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, and Jesus in the New Testament are both very emotional. That feels weird to say, probably because I grew up Baptist. But I have to say, like, it's true. I reread it over and over. I probably read the book of Mark like 5 times before I could utter the words that Jesus had a lot of emotions. Have you ever noticed it? So Yahweh in the Old Testament, Jesus in the New Testament, they respond with anger and sadness and compassion, all holy because they're doing it and they're holy. Even in John 13:21, it says that Jesus was troubled in spirit. So I did a word study on that, and it means worried. For some reason, that felt weird to me. I feel like I word studied it because it feels to me like the Bible doesn't want me to be anxious. It keeps telling me not to be anxious. But that's more of a comforting thing. It's not telling you, knock it off, calm down your anxiety. It's telling you, it's okay, everything's okay. Here's what you do with your anxiety. That's my paraphrase of Philippians 4:6. I don't have that up, but that's what it's okay. Everything's okay. Okay, so troubled in spirit. So peace, I'm starting to get excited. Peace, joy, comfort are not goals of ours as Christians that make us void of emotion. We're not just supposed to be calm all the time. We're not supposed to be zen-like, just kind of floating through. Instead, we integrate our normal emotions into our relationships with God, and that brings us peace, joy, and comfort, those good, like, Christmas feelings. Right? Okay, so, like, we bring it in. We lay it before him, and then from that, he brings us, I'll say it, the comfort and joy, and peace. Because we don't feel like we have to put on an act to be in his presence. We're always in his presence, right? So we don't have to put on an act. We can just be real. Lay it before him. And then he goes, okay, it's good. Psalm 34:18 says, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those that are crushed in spirit. The word crushed sticks with me, right? You're not just sad. You're crushed in spirit. And he is near to us. He's near to us in brokenheartedness. He's near to us all the time, but there's something about us knowing his presence when we're brokenhearted. He doesn't just allow us to feel sad. He doesn't just like sit there while we're feeling it and then wait for us to come around like tapping his foot until we're to the right, feeling the right thing. But he comes near, even when we're far away. Psalm 91:4 says, he will cover you with his feathers. I want you to picture this, okay? Like, turn on your imagination for a second. He'll cover you with his feathers. He will shelter you with his wings. His faithful promises are your armor and protection. So I picture probably a more noble bird than a chicken, but for some reason a chicken comes to mind. But I wonder what bird it is. Can someone look that up? That'd be great. I picture a noble bird. tucking me in underneath his wings and covering me. It's a comforting thing, right? Someone's giggling up there. I like it. Got the giggles. Giggles in church is a good thing. Here's our goal, that experiencing freedom and wisdom in our emotional life helps us to have healthier relationships with God and each other. Integration. We'll be able to experience love more deeply, we'll feel the love more deeply, and we'll demonstrate the love more real, more clearly to people in our lives. So the Bible teaches us not to suppress our emotion, not to ignore our emotion or manage them. That's where I fall these days, kind of trying to manage them. But it invites us to recognize our feelings accurately, express them honestly, and then we allow Jesus to reshape them completely. That's the gospel, you guys. Being in the kingdom of heaven means that we are able to be fully present before him because he died for us to bring us near, right? Here's how we do it. I'm going to drop some therapist language on you. You ready? It's going to make you fun. This is our $10 therapy words that I could say in a lot easier words, but we say it this way so that we can have a job. Okay. So, emotional identification. Say emotional identification. This is learning about your personal experience with your feelings, and that helps you understand why you behave the way that you do. Okay? The why is important. So there's guidelines to figuring out what you're feeling, but really everyone's unique because we all have different parents, we all have different DNA, we all have a different personality. If you have the same parents, you're in a different birth order. If you're not and you're a twin, I don't know, we'll figure that one out. But you know what I mean, right? We're all very unique. So we have our emotions. We all have our different emotional experiences. And something that really helps when you're trying to figure out what you're feeling is talking to someone that's good at it. Do you know someone that's really good at being angry? Like they directly tell you what they feel, but they don't overreact at you, and they don't tell you like they were mad at something 5 years ago, but like they just tell you in the moment, like within the week. Do you have anyone that's good at that? Me neither. Just kidding. There's like there are people that are good at that. There are people that are good at feeling worried and knowing how to comfort themselves when they're worried, so it doesn't become anxiety. There are people that are good at being sad. They feel free to tear up, and they feel free to comfort other people when they're sad, so they don't kind of drown you with them. There's people that are good at that, you guys. And, you know, there's people that might be bad at one and good at the other, so talk to them about the one they're good at. But ask them what they're good at. Ask them how they do it. How do they process emotion? My husband and I, so we had like some bad news a few years ago. My husband's very cool and stoic and laid back. He's super quiet and he's really hot. Just kidding. I mean, I'm not, but he said I'm not allowed to say that from stage anymore. Sorry. But so my husband is, he's very cool. He's very low key and cool. And we had some bad news, like a crisis that came up in our family a few years ago. And so we had to like go help right away. And so we're driving to our family member's house, and on the road, of course, in normal wife therapist fashion, I say, "How you feeling, babe? You feeling okay?" And he goes, "I mean, when I got the news, I was kind of angry, and then I started to feel sort of sad, and now I just feel really like I want to help, and I hope everything's okay." It made so much sense, the emotion, like the progression made so much sense. I was like, whoa. You're good at that too? That's not fair. Because I was feeling like so jumbled up in how I was feeling, you know? And like I could make sense of it, but it always felt out of order and stuff. And I've just learned to accept that my emotions are out of order. That's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But I was so impressed that he was good at it. So I've decided to interview him about emotions since then. All right, here's another thing about emotions that's important to know. We can rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. And often, like feelings in our body, which we'll talk about more in detail next. But really, when we rate emotions on a scale of 1 to 10, then we give ourselves kind of this full spectrum of how we feel. Instead of feeling super calm or so angry, I'm going to punch you in the face, you can kind of go, I'm starting to get tense because I feel angry, or I felt a little offended. So when you put it up on the scale, you see here, let's take anxiety for an example, okay? When I'm feeling like at a 2 with anxiety, I really feel like kind of pumped. Like maybe I've studied for a test. I don't have to take tests anymore, but let's say I used to study for tests and I'd be like super pumped, right? I'd be so excited. I knew all the material, but I had to be on my game. That's like a good kind of anxiety. So that's like for me like around a 2 or 3. Then as my anxiety grows, it starts to get bigger and bigger, and I start to feel physical symptoms of it. So let's say around a 4, my stomach starts to feel funny. And for a time when I was struggling with some anxiety, I would wake up in the morning and I would say, okay, my stomach feels funny, so it's probably like a 4 on my anxiety scale, but maybe it's because I drank too much coffee yesterday or ate too much sugar, so I'm going to eat a banana and see how my stomach feels. But my stomach was like a signal to know what I needed that day. So then I would eat a banana, and then I would go, okay, well, my stomach still feels funny, so I need some extra emotional regulation today. I need to like do some extra prayer. I need to make sure I'm taking care of myself. I need to not eat a bunch of food that will make me feel sicker, you know? And how do I take care of myself in a way where I can calm my anxiety back down that scale? Does that make sense? So in anxiety in particular, I use this scale because as I'm working with clients that have panic attacks, we'll identify the panic attack at like an 8. Can you pull the scale back up? Hold me in the back. Thank you. So we'll identify it at like an 8. But from there, we go, okay, so what are you feeling before you start to panic at a 6? What are you feeling at a 4? How do we start to calm you down at a 4, back down to a 2 or a 1, instead of waiting until you're all the way in panic mode to calm down? Does that make sense? So really, like, you want it to be something that you catch when it feels more manageable. So the scale's really helpful for that. Also, eat a banana when your stomach hurts. So kind of what I'm talking about, emotions, they join a physical experience. Notice that integration of the mind and the body and the soul, right? So we feel our feelings in our body. And for those of us that aren't good at just knowing our emotions, maybe if our parents didn't teach it to us, so it doesn't make a lot of sense and we don't have good language for it, often finding it in our body is a good start. So I can tell when I'm feeling tense because my nails are long. And especially when I used to do field-based therapy, I was on the road in traffic all day long, back and forth to people's houses. And so I'd hold the steering wheel so tight that like I would get the fingernail prints in my hands. I'm worried about my clients, so stressed. And then traffic. And I would end up actually having tension in my forearms. And so for a while I would notice when I was driving and doing field-based mental health, it was a stressful job, and I would notice and start kind of massaging my arms. Because they feel tense right now. Oh, this feels nice. Thanks, guys. So I can pick up on body tension by what's happening in my forearms. That sounds weird to tell you, but we're all unique, right? So what is that for you? The back carries a lot of tension. The neck carries tension. All sorts of different places in our body we feel anxiety. I have a list in my office of all the places where we feel stress. It's 4 pages, front and back, 12-point font. All the places that we feel stress in our body. Happiness, we feel like in our feet or our legs. I've been known to bounce up and down with excitement with my feet. Also sadness, anxiety, happiness, a bunch of emotions are felt around our heart. Makes sense why the Bible thought the heart was the center of our being, right? Sometimes knowing where your body acts up first gives you information about the rest of your emotion. Now let's talk about emotional regulation. Everyone say emotional regulation. $10 therapy word. So once we know what's happening, we have the information, then we can learn to regulate it. In our body, that can be like deep breathing or exercise. Walking is like one of the best things you can do for your mind and your heart and your soul. There's something about walking that resets you. Is that true for anybody else? It's good. I like it better than running. Muscle relaxation helps with tension. So think of me and my forearms, right? As I'm like kind of tensing them and relaxing them, I start to pick up on the fact that I feel tension. I don't know I feel tension until I start to squeeze and relax my muscles. And I go, oh, I feel tense. Okay, got to do something about that. In our mind and our heart, our job is to acknowledge the pain and the fear that we feel, know it's okay, and therefore we resist the shame, and then we ask for help from God in prayer. And we ask for help from people that love us. So one of my favorite ways to regulate my soul is the process of lament. Everyone say lament. Yes. Lament is a process of emotional identification and regulation, but it's in God's presence. He's there with us as we're doing it. And throughout the Bible, there's passages where people pour out their deepest hurts, their angers, their sadness, their fears in a very raw way to God, knowing that he hears us and is close to the brokenhearted. I don't know why, when I was a kid, I was never taught passages like one we're going to do right now. I just was never taught it. I think it's like a scary thing to teach on. But learning how to read the Bible and see people in the Bible pour out all of their anger, all of their sadness, even to tell God, you have abandoned me. That's something, it's biblical, everybody, right? But it's a scary thing to read, so we kind of brush over it. So we're going to read Psalm 13. I have to say the first time I heard Psalm 13 was in a song. It was a song by the band Shane and Shane. Anyone know Shane and Shane from 20 years ago? All right. And they just took, like their first album was taking Psalms and adding words to it. Adding music to it. So like I know a lot of these Psalms by heart, not because I read the Bible a lot back then, now I do, but because I knew these songs. And so it's actually hard for me to read it without singing it, so we'll try to do it. Let's read Psalm 13. Will you read it with me? Okay. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. And the enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. Isn't that something? There's like this emotional roller coaster in that one. So in Psalm 13, the author processes their wounds, their hurts, their anger, the emotions poured out in a way that feels uncomfortable, right? Like the author feels abandoned. How long, O Lord, will you forget me? How long will you hide your face from me? Didn't Susette just say he's near to the brokenhearted? Okay, but they're pouring out their emotion, right? And it's kind of hard to read. It's uncomfortable. And then there's this transition from verse 4 to verse 5, where the author switches from lamenting about the emotional and physical pain to restoring trust in God. So here's an important part of lament. Lament itself will be pouring out all this emotion and learning to regulate it, but part of the regulation for us spiritually is to set our minds on the fact that we can trust God. We can have faith in him. And trust here in Psalm 13 is the goal, to remember God's faithfulness and great love. And trusting here isn't something that we have. Like, do you know what I mean? Like you say, like, I have enough faith. Do you have enough faith? I must not be trusting him because I don't have enough faith. No, trust is something that you do. Trust is a verb. You do it in this moment. You say, I will choose to trust you despite the fact that I am in this pain. And I don't know what you're doing in the pain, but I will choose to trust you. So I've gone through a time in the last few years, my husband and I struggle with infertility. We've gone through a time in the last few years where like, it's not working. And everybody, I turned 39 on Friday. 39's a magic infertility age where you start looking in your future and kind of grieving what you wanted, you know, and wondering what the next steps are. And so I've had a time in the last few years where that grief, that lament, as I've been invited into telling God what I really feel, I've been angry and I've been sad and I've felt hopeless in his presence in the back doing the tech team, clicking the words. Like I'm sitting there clicking the words, feeling angry at him. But he is faithful, right? So even though I'm feeling these feelings, I know I'm permitted to tell him all of them, and I know that he is faithful. And I would go through times where I would say, I know you're faithful, but you don't feel faithful, but I know you're faithful. Hoping for that sandwich, you know? And that's a process of lament. I think I'm better at lamenting sadness than I am anger, but I've learned a really good lesson in that this year, where I felt like I'm worshiping him because I'm listening to these lyrics and I'm saying, I don't know, and yet you're faithful, you know? And I have to be honest, I said, I don't know for a couple months and then got to and yet you're faithful, but I want to integrate and yet you're faithful in that daily thing. Does that make sense? So lament invites us to feel the whole of our pain in God's presence, not to ignore part of it or shrink it to cope or pretend to be a good Christian, so I'm not going to acknowledge it while I'm feeling mad inside. And then we recognize that God's love and goodness and hope and bigness, that he's able to do more than we could ever hope or think. That's bigger than the pain, you know? And then we can live in the reality of what we feel, and that's where he meets us. Okay, so what if we could feel that full range of emotion without self-judgment? And then what if we have enough wisdom not to react, but then to respond and make decisions when we feel them? What if emotions were a normal part of your life and you just gave yourself permission to feel it, instead of it being something that you have to either avoid or scream out to get comforted? And what if, as the family of God, we invited a full range of emotion into our worship, into our prayer, into our relationships, all together as the kingdom of God, and we were able to be that light for everyone else? I'm going to pray a blessing over us. Romans 15:13 says, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit." Let's pray. Father God, thank you for these opportunities to know you more deeply, to know how trustworthy you are despite what's happening inside of us. And I pray that you will teach us day by day to experience more comfort from you and to tell you what's really going on and how we're really doing. Please guide us today, Lord.